Everybody, welcome to Domain Zacharioudakis. My name is Andreas Zacharioudakis. I'm the oldest son of the family that owns the winery, and I will also be your tour guide for today. We shall begin with a brief tour in the production facilities, talk a little bit about the winery's history, a few things about our production. Of course, whenever you have a question, feel free to ask. I have to make a disclaimer, I do tend to drink a lot of coffee, so I may also tend to speak very fast. If there is anything you do not understand, if there is anything at all you'd like me to repeat, or if there's any question in your mind, feel free to ask. If I can answer, I will. Okay? I want things to be as interactive as possible. Okay? So, you can follow me inside. So, as you can probably see and smell, we are in the post-harvest period. It is the only period when we are allowed to be this messy. We're not usually like this. This is just the period that we're making the wine. This is why we get all of these nice smells into the atmosphere in this room. But let us get a little bit to the history of the winery. The winery's history begins in the year 2000, when my father, Stylianos Zacharioudakis, began the whole project that you see around you, a modern family winery established on the land of my great-grandfather, a winery that is devoted to the production of high-quality organic wines that are based on our privately owned vineyards only. It is based on the 24 hectares of organically and traditionally cultivated vineyards that we have. The story begins, first of all, when we came here in the year 2000 to terraform the landscape, remove the stones and the wild plants. In 2003, we planted our first vineyards, and in 2004, we initiated the construction of the winery. In 2008, the winery was finished, and since then, we devoted our efforts to the production of our wines. The production includes grapes that of both local indigenous Cretan origin, a wider Greek origin, and French origin as well. The indigenous grapes include Kotsifali, Vidiano, Villana, Malvasia di Candia, Malvasia aromatica, Moscato Spinas, the Greek grape Syrtiko, and then the French grapes Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, and Sauvignon Blanc. Now, you don't have to remember all of those, there's no special prize at the end. As we said, the production is carried out in an organic manner. Of course, we follow the directions of the AHU for organic production concerning the limits of sulfites, the products that we use in our vineyards, and in general, all production methods that we undertake in this very facility. The production begins every August when a crew of strong local men and women from the villages around the area are coming up here every morning. At approximately 6 o'clock, we start working in order to avoid the hot Cretan sun at noon. We pick the grapes by hand scissor and put them in baskets. The baskets are carried over to the winery, they are cooled, and then we begin the production by simply unloading the baskets on a conveyor belt. We sort our grapes out, and then the grapes that are sorted will go for a crushing process and then for the pressing process. The grape juice will come to the tanks, it will ferment, it will be vinificated. It will require at least 3 to 4 months until the wine is at least theoretically ready. Ready to do what? To go either in the bottle or the barrel. Now, let's break some ice. Are there any questions so far? Because I want to make sure that you're following. Slow. Okay, that requires effort.
Where we need to work here. The grapes from the stems?
Yes, this is the crushing process. We
How?
use a crushing machine.
Machine.
Yes, we use a machine that has silicone paddles inside, it spins around, it crushes the bunches of grapes, separating the stem, throwing it on from one side, and from the lower end, the berries will drop in the press or in the vinificator tank.
How many people work here?
On a permanent basis, we have 7 employees, and then we have seasonal workers that can go from 5 up to 22 for pruning or harvesting. Yes.
Grapes that you are bringing from France, they are also organic. So do you have any special partner?
Grape varieties originate from France. The vineyards are all located here. They're all here. We cultivate them just like the rest. Now, bringing grapes all the way from France could be quite impractical, especially if you look at current transportation prices. It would be quite impractical to do that.
From this facility?
The frozen vineyard, 20 meters away from the eastern exit of the winery. The most distant is 5 kilometers away.
Du raisin, est-ce qu'il est sélectionné ou
What is the quality of the grapes? It's you selection the quality of what types of grapes you have. Only local or only local?
Cretan, Greek, and French. Now, Cretan and Greek, the distinction is that we have our PGI, protected geographical indication, for the local indigenous varieties, and of course we have also grapes like the Assyrtiko, which is registered as a wider Greek grape. It's not specifically Cretan in some sense. All of our vineyards are irrigated. We have a water spring in the village of Pluti, at the base of the mountain. We will see the village when we go upstairs from the tasting room. We pump the water up to the top of the hill, and then we just irrigate with gravity, simple as possible. You know, like stalactites, drop system.
It's groundwater or
It's what?
groundwater?
It's actually, yes, we pump it up from beneath the ground. It's like that's how you call it, groundwater. Groundwater. Okay, groundwater. Well, that's the majority of irrigation in this particular area. This area, unfortunately, lacks surface water. If we take an exception for the region of Zaros, then all the rest of the area it's like we drill for the water. We have seen that there is a serious drop on the level from which we drain the water. We go deeper and deeper all the time.
How your drilling place?
In all the area, in the entire area.
And what you do in that case?
Pray.
A question on this topic. Is there any management plan for all the area about the irrigation that you have to follow as also other producers?
There is, but unfortunately there is no will to implement anything like this.
And there is any control?
They are now trying to establish some control. There is a reorganization of irrigation in the area. I don't know if you noticed, but there's like a huge cut on the road coming up here. I don't know if you noticed on the bus, you might have bumped on it a bit. It's because now the municipalities are now reorganizing the water system, the irrigation systems. They're passing new tubes and all that with new clocks measuring consumption and all that. They are now trying to, let's say, prepare some basic infrastructure to implement water control. But to what extent this will be implemented is a whole different subject. In this area, we also have other problems. If we want to talk about the wider area, we have our area here in the northern part, where, okay, it's richer in terms of its water reserves, but in the valley of Masara, for example, it's very problematic. They have tried to solve the problem by creating the water dam of Faneromeni, but it's almost empty. It's at the moment. It's like yes. Now they're talking about the dam of Plakiotissa. Platis, they just want to, how's it called? To bypass the river in some sense, to change its flow.
Not bypass, to transfer.
To transfer, yes, to change the flow. Yes.
Municipality.
Exactly. That's what they're trying to do. Okay. But I think that this is my opinion. I'm not into water management. I'm just telling you that as a person who experiences the situation. So long as you just consume more water than what is added into the land, there is always going to be a deficit. When you have like outdoor cultivations, which require a lot of water and most of it is lost, it's not kept by the plant, then you will end up losing your water. And the more you do that, the more you sustain the problem. So unless there is some sort of, my opinion, since I am actually very fascinated by hydroponics lately, to be honest, unless we switch to a different production model, I don't say how hydroponics is a solution, I don't think there will be a solution to this problem.
Different type of harvest? What do you
Different type of plantations, for example, all it requires too much water in the valley, too much water. I know that because I'm also participating in the local municipal councils and all that as a spectator, and I just see what they're talking about. The situation is not exactly looking bright at the moment. They always thought that the Faneromeni dam was going to solve the problem forever. They just delayed the inevitable.
The needs are getting bigger and bigger.
Exactly.
How many cubic meters of water do you pump from the underground?
That's actually
Per
a
year.
question that I cannot answer.
Per year.
I cannot answer that, to be honest, because I don't know the answer exactly. It has never come to me to measure well. I cannot give you an approximation.
Panoramic Dam is in Mesara.
Yes, very close. It's close to.
It always collapses because of the ground under it.
because it's as vegetarian. Yeah.
Cars.
Limestone,
Right.
cars.
Okay, yeah, I don't know about that, but in general, people might have some friends who are irrigating from that area, and they always tell me there are issues with it. It's like it just runs out too fast. I don't know if it's the soil type. I don't know what's the problem. I'm not a specialist about that.
The consumption.
The consumption is a whole different subject. It's like there is very little control, and the costs are far too low at the moment. It's like antapodotiko. It's like they're selling the water at cost price in some sense.
So, what is the frequency in which you irrigate?
We don't irrigate a lot, to be honest. If I were to make an approximation, I would say we don't irrigate more than 100 hours a year. 100 hours a year. It's like I cannot tell you otherwise because it's like we just
Wait a day.
we irrigate during the night only to avoid evaporation, and we irrigate, let's say, 7-8 hours every night. That's it. Or not every night. I say for a total of 100 hours per vineyard. So the vineyard will not take more than 100 hours. This is by approximation. It might be lower than that even. Especially in years like this when we had rainfall up until the middle of June. It depends on the year. There is no standard answer to that. We don't irrigate a lot because, in fact, we don't have to be honest. In this particular area, we have a lower median temperature than the valley below. As you can see, it's always windy up here. It's always more fresh than it is in the valley below. So the climate conditions here are different.
Which altitude do you have the vineyards?
We have vineyards that start from 300 meters, stretch all the way to 510, 520.
What soil types are changing depending on the variety, or?
The soil here is clay-based. It's also very rich in calcium, just like the rest of this area. It's the typical Asprougia white soil that we have here in Crete.
You don't have different terroir, it's one. You don't have different terroir, it's one.
It's not something that implies only the soil, it's something that implies also the general climate conditions of an area. So we do have a different terroir because we have different median temperatures, we have more rainfall than the valley below, and we actually do get snow every single year up here. So we have a pretty different terroir than from the rest of the area. Terroir is actually a combination of all the elements that can be included in areas let's say climate and microclimate. So it's like the soil type, it's the weather type, it's the average temperature, it's all the elements around, exactly, the biodiversity, everything that is put into the vineyard.
The vineyards. So he has specific variety, specific soil type, a specific indicators of biodiversity, water, pH, and that will be the terroir.
Exactly. It's something the biome around the vineyard itself. So, now,
Snow.
yes, it's not like the Alps. We do get it for like, it's like usually 1 or 2 days.
In Europe.
Yes. In cold years, it might be 3. So, we do put photos like that every year when it happens in our Instagram. Every year.
Every year.
Here, every year. We are at the same altitude with Agia Varvara. Yes.
Oh, okay.
We are actually very high. We're at the same altitude with Zaros.
So in Crete we have snow every year, and also it's really nice for skiing.
In the lower part, not so much.
In the plateaus, but for 300 meters.
You get snow.
You will see some photos on the snow when we go upstairs.
Okay.
So, we can keep going because due to the fermentation, it's quite humid also in here. So we can move on to the other room where it's more pleasant. So, as you can all see, we are now in the cellar of the winery. This is where we keep our oak barrels. The barrels are all imported from France. They are all made of oak. We do not use any fancy types of woods. We do not follow any marketing-oriented aging in here. We just do what is practical and we do what is traditional. The barrels are following the barrique style, and they are going to host approximately a quarter of our yearly volume. Our yearly volume is approximately 120,000 bottles, so like 30,000 bottles wherever will ever find their way into here. The rest of the wines will just be bottled directly from the stainless steel tanks. The aging span for these barrels is between 4 months and 2 years. It depends on each specific wine. You should imagine that winemaking is exactly like cooking. You should imagine that we have our raw materials like the grapes. They have certain preparation phase. They have a certain execution phase for the recipe. And then you can imagine that the barrel is like a spice, just like black pepper. There are certain foods that require black pepper more or less, and there are certain foods that do not require it at all. The same applies for the wine as well. After the wine is aged here, we just filter it, send it to the stainless steel tanks, let it rest, and then we bottle it. Simple as that. It's mostly red wine that we age in these barrels, but we also have a single white wine made from a local grape that spends approximately 4 months in these oak barrels. Now, any questions concerning the barrels or anything else? Because I interrupt the question phase up there.
You don't keep it for more than 2 years. You don't have wines.
That's the, let's say, we're still working on them. They're not yet ready, but we do experiment on wines for longer aging. These are usually held in older barrels, not in younger barrels. But the current range that we sell is between 4 months and 2 years. In the Zacharioudakis Winery, we also give a lot of emphasis on bottle aging, which is also very important. It's like we're not fans of the New World wine school, where it's like all about oaky wines. We don't like that. We refrain from following that school. We just follow the old-fashioned way. We believe that the barrel should join the wine, complement it, and not cover it. It's like a relationship where both parties have to respect each other.
And the good of the barrel has an impact on the wine
Flavor.
taste, the flavor.
Definitely. Well, what actually happens, I can give some basic information on how it works, because it's a multivariable equation. It's just like, in wine, every question should be answered with "it depends," because there are many variables. The basic thing that I can tell you is, for example, that the barrel is not just a static object like the stainless steel tanks. It is, in some sense, a process that is living and ongoing. The barrel breathes in. There is contact between the wine and the outside world through the pores of the oak. Of course, this is one major factor of what makes the barrel what it is. Oxygen is going inside, it's filtered through the pores of the oak, and it creates what we call a noble oxidation process. We call it noble because it does not yield the bad aromas of oxidation. This slight oxidation actually creates new chemical bonds that will yield new aromas and flavors. But it does not operate alone. Every barrel inside is scorched, it is burned on the inside. Some companies might just burn them on their own, or they might add, let's say, aromatics that they will burn inside to add to the potency of the barrels. There are different levels of this scorching process. There is light, medium, and heavy toasting, as it is called. So there is actually all of these elements that play into it.
Or all are important?
I'm not aware of a barrel production that is big enough. I know that there are people who make handmade barrels. But even from all the winemakers that I talk with, there isn't really anyone who just buys Greek barrels. They might buy some handmade barrels for specific wines, but that is it. I'm not aware of a big barrel making production. Although neighboring countries like Bulgaria do produce a lot of barrels. And in fact, one of the biggest producers is also of Greek descent over there. Yes. But they still have to come, from what we have seen, sample wines we have tried that have been aged in these barrels, they still have a long way to come and catch up with the French barrels or the Hungarian barrels and so on. So we'll see. Perhaps in the future, don't forget that a few years ago there wasn't
Yes. In Crete, a few makers, yes.
It was just, there is a certain time of economic modernization in every single society. When all of these small businesses, usually they get an influx of capital or there is actually some help, and then they just grow into something bigger. Well, I don't know what are the exact reasons that we didn't get to make this modernization of the barrel making production, but the result is what matters. So the result is that we don't have barrel making production. So,
So how long can you use?
That's what my question was.
I mean, the type.
but because we have many different types of barrels. You have barrels that we have to replace every 6 years. We have barrels that we keep for a decade.
What happens to them so that they need changing?
So there are some locals who just want the used barrel, or there are some companies that are using them for decor. It depends. How you go to every wine bar nowadays, and there is barrel decor everywhere. It's like
Choices of
yes, in other countries like France, what they do with the used wine barrels, they ship them all the way to the UK, where they make brandy, whiskey, and they want the used barrels for that.
Some they repair, some they clean, and they. Yes. Yes.
Too long after that. Don't forget, the barrel is made of oak. Oak is an organic material. It's an organic component. It disintegrates. It's like it deteriorates through the passing of time. It doesn't last forever. So there is that. Then also the scorching leaves from the inside. Wine is trapped through the pores of the oak, closing them. So it's like after some point, theoretically at least, you can only use the wine to store your wine inside.
But why they always tell in movies and stuff like this wine it's 30 years old in a bar?
Yeah, there are.
Big barrels.
I don't know if I would like to try a wine that has been aged for 30 years in a barrel. This is not. Well, I'll tell you something. In the past, it would be perfectly possible. We should all realize that the barrel was never meant to be used for aging. The barrel is just a logistical innovation, historically speaking. We just moved from clay vessels that could support a limited amount of liquid to these wooden vessels that could support a larger amount of liquid, and they can be moved around without using too many people because you can roll it. You cannot roll a clay vessel, but you can roll this one. So this logistical innovation became so widespread and it was so common that it's only reasonable that oak aging became a thing, which is a byproduct of this innovation. Just imagine, the barrel is in some sense the equivalent of the pallet, on which we can just put lots of stuff, move it around with forklifts, and then we can just move things around faster, at larger volume. You should imagine the barrel like this.
I think there is a misunderstanding somewhere of a mixing. When you see these huge barrels, in some cases, these are indeed for storing, but not usually wine. It is for other liquids like brandy or other things. These barrels are there for hundreds of years sometimes.
These are for static storaging in some sense. They don't move them around. And there is also another factor. After you use them for some time, it's not that they will give bad aromas. They will just stop giving anything altogether. It's like the wood just dies off, the scorching just fades away.
They don't need to clean it. It is static. It's not any longer this process. And this is the main thing. And the second thing is that for some of these barrels, you can always have the wine of this year, 100 whatever. When you remove let's say 10, 20, 30 bottles, not more, you add the year before, and the year before, and the year before. So keeping it always of the same period and bottling always a small amount every year of 1820 or 1830. But these are for wines. It's not for this, for the wine. It is for liquids, for liquors.
Although we do see lots of bigger barrels appearing in wineries across the world, we have the 2,000-liter barrels, 3,000-liter barrels. First of all, they delay the aging process. They slow it down. The reason, of course, being that there is a larger distance between the core of the wine and the outer layers of the wine, which come in contact with the barrel. There is also the fact that you have a smaller volume of wine that comes in contact with the oak, smaller percentage in some sense, smaller surface, and then there is also the fact that the wine just doesn't breathe the same way when it's in such a bigger barrel. So there are all of these different factors you have to take into account. And of course, we should all be wary that Nowadays, in the modern era, when wine production is slowly being streamlined and industrialized, there are people who don't use barrels altogether for aging, and they're just using lots of different scanning methods. Yes.
It's not true, they say.
Method one, which one?
I don't want to harm the reputation of the global wine industry. So, and for example, they just used ground oak chips that they just throw into the stainless steel tank. They just mix it around, filter it. They call it oak aging. This is this is perhaps the most common practice across the world at the moment.
Not really.
So
Okay,
the barrels, it should be like a certificate to you. It's like these barrels are real. These guys are using real barrels. They're using the real thing.
So what do you do with the filter products?
What do you filter?
With the filter products, I mean the rest. When you filter the wine.
Definitely, the wine at various stages of production, wine also carries lots of solids. For example, in the post fermentation period, the wine is full of micro solids inside. These are either proteins floating around. This is also how are they called? Tartaric elements. We call them trichica. These elements are actually, they have to be removed if you want to make the wine crystal clear.
Insoluble salts that are formed with trivial. Yeah.
So we use filtering to filter them out and keep the liquid that we all know and love.
Yeah. Exactly. What do you do with the filtered products? With the waste?
Without the way.
Oh.
At that stage, there is no practical use for it.
Okay.
What? Sorry, what we do?
The sediment is not, yeah.
Way to
use it.
Theoretically, I know that there is a tip. Making compost.
yes.
I don't know if it would be practical because this waste also contains alcohol. I don't know the science behind it, to be honest, but I don't know.
That's you're talking about solids.
All the organic waste that comes from the pressing, for example, pressed grapes, the seeds, the stems, all of that, we put it in the vineyard, we open a hole, turn it into a humus, a compost, and we just use it to fertilize the younger vineyards.
But this
is not the
no.
This is the sediment, the chemical sediment that is formed during the process.
But not used for real.
But maybe you can find a way to produce energy. Or
It's very.
It's like 100%.
There are ways to use it for coloring, for several, but these are experimental, not.
It's like, out of this waste, how much we will have? Let's say
if you store it.
800 liters. How much energy can it produce?
Not to make it.
No, this is. It is seasonal.
Yeah.
It is seasonal
Yes.
and relatively small quantity. In some cases, they use it for giving color to other products
Okay.
and some other things, but these are rather experimental.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much?
100,000 approximately.
How many?
Back to the size of our vineyard, it's quite a small production, but it's due to the organic farming and on our cultivation methods. As you will see upstairs on the photos, we do cultivate our vineyards on terraces. And over there, the vineyards tend to have lower yields in general. So just imagine, we don't use fertilizers, we don't use hormones, we don't use anything to increase productivity. Now, there were many questions across the tour. People asking, why did we choose this particular location? Why did we come here? And there is actually a variety of different factors that contributed into that. First of all, there was the sentimental factor. My father grew up in the village of Pruti that you will see from the glass windows later on. He was very close to this particular location. There's of course the reason that he had a small inheritance from my great-grandfather up here. So it was very easy for him to just accumulate the rest of the land slowly, step by step, and make the vineyard here. But these are just some of the reasons. In the, let's say, meat and potatoes of the thing, there were also many technical aspects of this particular hill that were preferred in contrast to other regions when we made our planning. First of all, the altitude. This altitude is very important. As you will see when you visit down, on the opposite mountains and hills, there are lots of wind turbines right on our particular altitude. This is because, as you can see from the wind outside, this is a crossroad of winds. This place is always very windy, and this keeps our vineyards very fresh and cool. Especially in the summertime, at the peak of summer, around the middle of July and later on, when temperatures in the valley of Mesara can reach even to 40-42 degrees Celsius. This year we also had a heat wave that reached all the way up to 46 in Petrokefali. To give you perspective, a heat wave in Crete is nothing like a heat wave in Central Europe. This area remains a lot cooler, at least 4 or 5 degrees lower than at the valley below. Another aspect was also the existence of all of those steep slopes around the hill that allowed us to take full advantage of the mountain's altitude. They allowed us to start our vineyards from at certain points 300 meters and stretch them up 520. These 200 meters in between are very important because you're actually not planting a single vineyard, you're planting many micro vineyards. Vineyards exposed to different levels of rain, wind, sunlight, and heat. Very important. You're also allowed like this to play with the orientation of the hill. Now, these photos here, they represent terraces from two sides of the hill, east and west. Now, let us imagine that my fist is the sun. The sun always rises from the east. As you can see, there is definitely some sunlight exposure to these terraces, but there is something obstructing the light on the other side, and that is the hill itself. In fact, our eastern terraces get sunlight in the morning, while the western ones don't, and at around 12 o'clock, then the sunlight begins to drop on these hillsides on the west. When the sun goes over the other side, there is a shade slowly covering the eastern terraces. So we can actually have vineyards that get 7 or 8 hours of sunlight every single day. This is very, very important in a hot island like Crete. So, of course, there is a soil type. Of course, there are other elements like, for example, the additional rain and the additional snowfall that we get every year. In fact, you can see some photos from the snowfall over there. We do get snow every year up here, as we said downstairs, for 1 or 2 days. Not that much, not like the Alps. Cold days, cold years, it might be 3 days. Unfortunately, it comes very late, usually in early February, so we cannot make ice wine. But even if we did, no one would believe it. Ice wine from Crete. In Crete. This is my father. Those in the group who know him should know that this photo was taken 22 years ago. He's still exactly the same, only the beard has that black. Only the beard. Yes. It's like wine is full of antioxidants. They slow age. Genetics also help. So, I answered the question why we chose this place.
I don't know, but I remember from your father saying that there were some ancient or medieval vineyards in this area, and there are proofs for that.
Yes, in the village of Putti, at the edge of the village, we had the new highway construction site. While they were constructing the highway, the crews uncovered some ruins from the Hellenistic era, from what they say. That's the era of Alexander the Great and his descendants.
Century BC.
Exactly. And the ruins are stone presses cut in stone. That's it. Places where people would just drop the grapes inside and press them with their feet. This indicates a wine production already from the Hellenistic era in this particular area. Then, of course, we also have other historical evidence. In fact, we undertook an effort to make this known, but unfortunately, higher powers prevented us from doing so. There was a medieval trade lane starting from this area, ending all the way to today's Ukraine, in the city of Lvov. In there lived a powerful merchant of Cretan origin, Konstantinos Korniachtos, who, in cooperation with a local man whose descendants still live in this area, Mr. Zacharioudakis, they would import big amounts of wine from this area. We're talking about dozens of tons of wine on a yearly basis, and export them all the way to that time Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, or the Kingdom of Poland, or whatever people want to call it. So, this area has a continuous wine production and the tradition of wine trading throughout history.
I think this is for what we are discussing, the intangible heritage, and what we are talking about here. You see how important water is here and water management. The vineyard is one of the most wise use of water conditions. It is not that, I don't know how much, I mean, if there are irrigated and yes.
And you talk about how irrigate all that.